Hello, welcome to our program, Getting Prepared for Divorce. My name is Deborah Carter. I am a librarian from the San Marcos Public Library, and we are very grateful here at the library to have two experts in our area who are helping to untangle the unknown together, as they say. We have Shalana Poole, certified divorce financial analyst, and Linda Barfield, client service manager. So thank you both so much for being here and for giving light to this issue, which is so important and I think not talked about often in our everyday dialogue. So I feel like we don't know a lot about this topic.
Hi, Deborah. Yes, you're right. This is one of those taboo subjects that families, friends don't normally talk about. They usually tiptoe around the word divorce for one reason or another. But we're here. We're here, and it is a way of life, unfortunately. My name is Shalana Poole. I am a certified divorce financial analyst, as Deborah mentioned. I have been in practice in the financial services industry for 15 some odd years. It makes me feel old when I say that. But I started as a certified divorce financial analyst a few years ago. I've been a certified financial planner for the bulk of my time in the financial services industry. This is Linda Barfield. She is my right-hand woman. You're right, the client service operations, but she wears all the hats. She is the office manager. She is the client service manager. She is the Shalana manager to make sure that my brain is on properly. But we're very, very grateful that you have asked us to be here and present to the public in regards to this particular subject, because it is one that's not talked about enough. Go ahead and get started here. We do want you to ask as many questions as possible because we want to make sure that we're a valuable resource to you. And so if there's a question that you have, we ask you to go ahead and put it in the chat. We will get to those at the end of the presentation, as well as anything else that you would like to ask as well. Deborah, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you said it earlier, but just want to re-note, we're going to stop the recording at the end of the presentation so that we can have a more intimate discussion around your specific questions if need be, without it being shared with the world. And we're perfectly okay with that. Is that correct, Deborah?
That's right. Yes, I'll stop the recording and then we can have a more private dialogue.
Awesome. Awesome. I like that. So who are we? Spoole 360 Divorce, as this diagram illustrates, is almost the go-between, the middle company, if you will, between your legal representation, your therapist, your family counselor, your financial advisor, and getting on to the next stage in your life. What we do is not the legal part of the divorce. We are not lawyers. We are not therapists. Although I am a financial advisor, I do not practice as an advisor through this particular avenue. But what we do is we help you understand your financial situation as it is right now, all of the options available to you when it comes to separating those assets so that it's done in the most equitable way possible. And then we like to make sure that we pull that emotional component away from the decision-making process so that we can make logical decisions going forward for the right now as well as in the future. So we work very closely, though, with your legal representation if you have one. We will make sure that if you need counseling, we have resources available for you to do that we know of. If you need a financial advisor, we know how to point you in the right direction for that, as well as a CPA, because taxes are very important as well. Linda and I do not come at this very lightly. We have both gone through our own version of domestic restructuring, which is what I like to call it. We are restructuring our domestic lives. And so we come at this from that perspective initially, meaning I can speak for both of us when I say we would have done things very differently when we were going through our transition in life. And every client that I've talked to, every person that's not a client has said the exact same thing. But the key is, what do you do? Where do you go? Who helps you? Because divorce isn't something that has a written book about it. There's not a step-by-step play, especially since divorce is a very personalized and different for every situation. With that, let's look at it from this perspective. When two people come together, they're bringing with them a lot of their history, their knowledge, their thought processes about money and finances. There's a lot of things that our families taught us or didn't teach us about money. There's a lot of nuances regarding how to manage money, how to make it work for you. And two people are coming together with the mindset of it's different. I do it this way, you do it this way. But what happens and what we found, and this is from various sources here, is that over 65% of those couples never really have the proper communication on what to do with this money, what to do with these two buckets or ideas around finances. And so with that, roughly, again, these are just various resources, roughly about 30% of those couples that don't have that intimate financial conversation end up in divorce or end up in turmoil. And so with that, we understand that money, communication, usually the number one factor when it comes to divorce or domestic restructuring. We want to be able to help with that. Our goal is not to get you divorced. We don't want you to go there, but if there's a way that we can help you through that process, through that transition, and ease out that communication, that's what we would like to do. So when you're there, however, when you're in the midst of it, your mind is blown, it's gone. You have all these questions swirling around in your head. How did I get here? What's going to happen to me? What can I afford to be on my own? Oh, can my ex-spouse afford to be on their own? Where am I going to live? Who's going to take care of the kids? Am I on this by myself? I'm on an island. I have no one to talk to. All of those emotions, all of those questions are swirling around inside of us while we're dealing with the emotional toil that what we thought of as our union together, our marriage, is no longer. And how do I fix it? How do I emotionally get through all of this while answering all of these questions? One way that we like to look at this is to say, let's set ourselves free. How do we do that? Knowledge in our mind is freedom. The more we know, the more you understand, it allows the human brain to almost separate the emotional decisions from the logical decisions. And when you do that, then you're able to, in most cases, make decisions that affect you positively in the short and the long run. It doesn't bring down the emotional toil that you may be feeling with this transition, but at least it helps you move through it a little smoother. And that's our goal, is to help you move through this smoother and make logical decisions. So where do you start? Well, let's start at the beginning. Let's get organized. Let's understand who we are. Let's understand what we have. Let's understand who exists in front of me from a financial perspective, right? So what you have to do is let's just start taking inventory. Linda and I give our clients a inventory list, and it's pretty exhaustive. It's really long. It looks extremely daunting, but we're trying to cover all bases when we are at this point. We do this with every client, and ultimately every client walks away from this going, okay, I didn't realize XYZ, or I did realize XYZ. But one thing that I think is common is that it releases a little bit of that stress once you know what you don't know. So where do we start? We start with the accounts that are in your name. Let's look at all the bank accounts, all the financial accounts that you have in your name. And why do we start there? Because you have access to them. Even if you are the spouse that did not deal with the finances in the household, you just took your hands off of it and said, honey, you take care of it and let me know where we are in the end. You still have the ability to access the accounts that are in your name. A call to the financial institution and asking for a statement is a way to start there. I will say that Linda and I do a lot of hand-holding, or we allow ourselves to do hand-holding with our clients or anyone that wants to work with us. We'll work with you to get those statements from those institutions and help walk you through that process. Now, what about the accounts that you don't know about? They're in your name, but you didn't know they existed. Well, that's one thing that we like to ask is that get your credit reports, all 3 credit reports. It's a snapshot in time And it literally shows you 80 to 90% of the financial accounts that you have in your name. Now, it won't show things like your investment accounts, your retirement accounts. That's not on your credit report. However, it will show things that are debts in your name, mortgage, cars, credit cards, student loans. All of that will be on your credit report, as well as banking information. So banks sometimes, or most of the time, report to credit agencies as well, sometimes. And so there's some information on that also. The other thing to note about the credit reports is that in some situations, I'm not saying this happens all the time, but in some situations, you may find that a spouse, an angered spouse, may or may not have opened up accounts in your name or with your name, and you weren't aware of it for one reason or another. And you pull the credit report and you think, wait a minute, this isn't for me. I've never seen this before in my life. How do I get this? Those credit reports will help us identify what that is, as well as some other things. So then you move on to the next part. Well, tax returns. There's more information on the tax returns that you can ascertain from that as well. Sometimes it's bank statements, it's investment accounts, because you have capital gains that are reported. You have interest credit that's reported. The financial institutions have to report certain things to the IRS. And when they do that, it's on your tax returns. And so we like to go back 3 years so that we can pull as much history as possible to pull the information off your tax return that you may or may not know. Again, right, wrong, or indifferent, there are times when one spouse will just sign the tax return and the other spouse was the one that was doing all the data collecting to put on the tax return. And the other spouse has no idea what's on there or what went into it. So pulling those tax returns helps you, again, understand a good portion of your financial situation. We've also found that there are situations, and this is usually after the divorce, the post-divorce case, where someone does not really know how to access their accounts. Like, how do you pay your utilities? Well, there's a login information for that. The other spouse took care of it. Where do I go for my investments accounts? Well, you can call them, you can walk into the facility, or you can do it online. You need to have all that login information. And if not, then we need to work with you to determine if that's the right way for you to access all of your information. Insurance accounts, and I don't just mean medical insurance. I mean health insurance, like I just mentioned, car insurance, mortgages, mortgage insurance, life insurance, annuities, that falls under an insurance type account. All of that, most people tend to forget about. And thus they forget one more important thing, which isn't on this particular slide, but they forget the beneficiaries. Extremely important in getting organized is understanding who is the current beneficiary on your financial accounts. This story has been told, a version of this story has been told in our industry for years and years and years because it continually happens. There are times where you have someone named as your beneficiary. You go through your domestic restructuring, you have a new life ahead of you, but never changed your beneficiary on your financial accounts. You pass away, your new life, your new family is hoping that they will be the benefactors of those financial products, but because you never changed it on the document, on the account itself, it goes to your old. Extremely important to know. So that's part of getting organized. All of that is really part of getting organized. And then there's the income portion of it. What's your current income source? Where are those pieces coming from? Is it coming from you directly and your spouse? Is it coming only from your spouse? Is Social Security involved? All of that is extremely important as well, because then we have to work with you to understand how do you position yourself for the next stage with that income. But we can't do that until we talk about this last bullet, which is expenses. Now, combine the income and the expenses actually they create what I call a 4-letter word, which is a budget. And of course, a budget is not necessarily 4 letters, but it's treated that way by some people. So we have to understand what the expenses are so that we can create a new budget for you. We can create your current budget. You have to know how you're going to live going forward. There are many times where we have witnessed people living blindly with their income, especially if one spouse was just giving them a allowance throughout the year and they just thought, I can spend what I want. My spouse is going to give that to me. Not the case when you're about to enter into a new phase of your life where you need to understand what your expenses are so that you can understand how the income comes in so we can have a positive cash flow going forward. Your expenses as a joint individual will inevitably look different as individuals, as you by yourself. So these are a good step. This entire slide is a really good step on where to get started. Know who you are and know what you don't know about yourself. And one thing I'll just go ahead and mention here is that you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to do this piece alone. We have resources that will help you gather the documents. We have resources that will help you understand what's in those documents. That's what we do. We are here to help through that particular process, but we know for a fact we can't get you through your domestic restructuring without starting here. Hopefully that makes sense. So one thing to also understand is knowing what you don't know. Many people would think it's time to get divorced. Let me go hire the first lawyer that I can find, without understanding that there are many different ways that you can get divorced. And this is just a few of them. One that's called a pro se, where you and the spouse agree, you know what, I'm done. I don't want to do this. Don't take the legal route. We agree on how we're going to split things up. We're just going to go to the county, file our petition, and 60 days later, we'll be able to officially get divorced. That's the time frame in Texas, by the way. There's also the option for mediation, where you don't necessarily bring in a lawyer, but you bring someone that's a trained mediator to come in and listen to both sides of the house, where you are both presenting what you want from the other person. And their job is not to come up with the solution, but to help you to facilitate the conversation so that you can come up with a really good solution without having to go through the legal process and whatnot. So then you can go down one step further, and that's litigation, where you just don't agree. We just don't agree. We are going to agree not to agree. We need to get the legal team involved and move forward. Well, that's where your separate lawyers are there to support you to get the best for you. They may use mediators. They also may use someone like myself, a certified divorce financial analyst, because sometimes taking those assets and just splitting them 50-50 is not the right way to go. There are tax implications, there's withdrawal implications. There's a lot of implications that aren't really taken into account when you just blanketly say 50-50 across the board. In some cases that works, but that's not the case for everyone. The lawyers will come in and do as much as they can to help you get divorced. And sometimes it could get pretty messy and pretty costly in order to get you to a divorce that you can eventually lean on. Lastly, I'll mention there's something called a collaborative divorce. I really like this approach because it's a team approach. I'm a very team-oriented type of person where it brings in all the professionals that's needed in order to help you get to the other side of your journey, right? So we're looking at the lawyers. We're looking at a collaborative lawyer. We're looking at a collaborative certified divorce financial analyst, a therapist, family therapist, a tax person. We're looking at all the major players to help you get through this as smoothly as possible. Any one of these processes are adequate for getting a divorce. It really depends on your situation. But again, the intent of this particular conversation we're having today is to show that there are different ways. It's to get prepared and to have that knowledge so that you can know there are different ways to get a divorce and you're not just stuck in one way. We plan on doing a couple of different conversations through the library. Thank you, Deborah, again. And one of which is to go a little bit more in depth with the different types of divorce. I will hopefully have someone on the legal team to go into deeper detail with these. I was just wanting to give you a good high level. So where are we now? We've gotten organized. We know who we are. We know what we want to achieve to some degree. We have a process in place, or the start of a process in place. So what happens? Now it's time to dream. Things have been so confusing and up in the air, and I'm speaking only in generic terms. It's not the same for everyone, but things have been so emotional and up in the air and so confusing that we forget to dream and ask ourselves, what do we want? You're at this transition point in your life. It's okay to take a moment and try to understand, what do you want? Think about the life that you are about to enter into. Now, that doesn't mean that it's inevitable that you're getting a divorce. Maybe the solution is that you're not going to end up getting a divorce, but you envision yourself with your spouse living differently from a financial standpoint. You wouldn't know how that would look if you didn't do the original step and get organized and know exactly what you have. What are our living arrangements going to be? Am I going to stay in this exact same house where I raise my kids, or am I going to live somewhere else? A lot of times the emotions take over and say, I want to stay in this house. This is where my kids were born. This is where we first met. There are a lot of emotional ties to this home. However, what about the situation about when everything is said and done, you got the home, you were awarded the home. What about all those expenses that came with running that home? Property taxes, because we all know those exist and they were not going away and they're probably going up higher. The utilities associated with it. The home breaks down. What if it's an older home and you have to now spend all this money to go into the home? Well, congratulations, you won the home, but you also won all of the debts and expenses to go along with that. And did we split the assets the right way to accommodate for all of that? Again, it's something that we like to work with. And then what are your sources of support? Meaning, what are your income sources? At this point, if you were the primary breadwinner, you already know, but what if you weren't? Where do you want that to come from? Do you need to go back to school? Is that something that you can work out with your spouse or soon to be ex-spouse to say, hey, do you think you can help me for a year or two to go back to school so I can get proper sources of income? Since I've been, stay-at-home mom for so long, or stay-at-home dad for so long, how can we work this out so that I have the adequate support needed to get back on my feet? Lastly, I mentioned this before, but let's be logical versus emotional. This whole process, this whole transitional process is emotional in one way or another. And we know from various resources and research that emotions don't necessarily allow us to make the best decisions. We make the ones that feel good right here, right now, but they're probably not the best ones for us in the long run. So going through this whole process will help us make more logical decisions, as well as deal with that emotions. I know I said that before, but I think that's extremely important. It would have definitely saved me when I was going through my domestic restructuring 100 years ago. So our goal is to help everyone else do the same thing. So you're at this stage, you're getting a divorce or considering reconciling your family once again, and you feel out on an island by yourself. You don't have to do it alone. It is definitely a team. We ask you, who is your support system? We ask you, can you lean on your family and friends? Who do you need? Do we need to put you in contact with someone? Do we need to put your kids in contact with someone? Gravitate and get a good support system to help you through this transition, as well as be on the other side. Do you need legal representation? Again, that's your lawyer or your mediator. What about your mental well-being for your family, for yourself, for anyone involved in this process? A divorce isn't just the sole two of you. It affects a whole village, if you will. How do we make sure everybody is okay at the end of this as best as possible? And then, of course, there's the financial representation of it. A certified financial planner is good to have. An advisor is good to have. Going through this process, I encourage you to at least have a conversation with a certified divorce financial analyst. I'll tell you, in this space, since I've started doing this, not a lot of people have heard of CDFA, Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. So they have no idea what that is. There are some lawyers that aren't even sure what a CDFA is supposed to do or how they play in the whole game. lawyers are great and very intelligent with the law. They not all the time do we find that their area of expertise are the nuances of how to split the finances in the most equitable way possible. And that's where we come in. We make it easy for them. We like to make sure that we're giving them that spreadsheet, that asset report that makes it easy for them as well. Again, the whole point is to make this as smooth and easy as possible. With that, I really don't have much more to offer you. I hope that there's something I said throughout all of this that rings true to you. If there's something that you want to speak about on a more one-on-one basis, Linda and I are wide open. What we want to say to you right now is, who knows where you are on the line of your domestic restructuring transition process, but you are where you are. And it's okay to start right where you are. It's okay to start right there, and we'll help you through the rest of it. We ask you to reach out to us. Again, my name is Shalana Poole. My right-hand woman is Linda Barfield. Our contact information is on the screen, and we look very forward to helping anyone who needs to reach out to us. Deborah, we thank you again in the San Marcos Library for this opportunity, and looking forward to helping your constituents in the future.
Thank you so much. That's so much information. You know, I was thinking about how I don't have conversations about finances in general, much less during an emotionally, difficult time that's not necessarily about finances. It's about our sort of family lives. And so this is so crucial, these conversations that we don't even know how to start to have. Wow.
I think you're right with that. And one way, if I may, to help those that aren't even in the transitionary point is, to your point, households don't have that conversation, which is what I was saying in the beginning of all of this. So how do you even have that? Well, number one, it goes back to that slide, get organized. It's okay to sit your spouse down and say, honey, what do we have? How are we looking? Have a once a quarter conversation about this, once a month, annually. Just have a conversation about, what do we look like? How are we looking here? Are you good? Are we good? Give me the state of the union. Usually one person in the relationship is the chief financial officer of the household. I mean, you can wear that. You are a CFO, right? And most of the time, someone that's that chief financial officer likes to be able to kind of discuss and share, here's what I've done. It makes them kind of proud. This is where we are. So for those couples that aren't going through a domestic restructuring, still sit down and have the conversation.
Yeah, that's great advice. It's sometimes alarming how emotional finances can be, because we think of them as this, the business end of our lives, but it's clearly not. When something changes dramatically and suddenly or unexpectedly, then we are very emotional about our finances, and it can change the way we feel about other people or about our lives or jobs. This is great. So we are going to turn off the recording so anybody online can ask any questions in private. But for the folks at home who might be viewing this video later on our YouTube channel, I see that you have your phone number and email address. So that is how they would get a hold of you for any follow-up questions.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Shalana and Linda. I appreciate it more than to have this really, genuinely precious information out there. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.